Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today, I am so excited to say we have Karen, our education kids analyst here at hackmankind.com. Make sure that you are signed up at www.hackmankind.com to have backstage access and VIP access to Karen and asking her questions. I do apologize if my internet is a little choppy. I am on a mission to go home to my new home in Florida, and I am right now, I'm not in the living room. This is a virtual background. I'm sitting in a car next to a gas station and Burger King trying to manage all this. So thank you so much for tuning in. And most importantly, Karen's here and she's got a great connection. So I'm gonna head on over and head the mic over to you, Karen. This week's theme is self-discipline. So what are your thoughts on that when it relates to education and children?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for being here. I know that it's a challenge and I appreciate you stepping up to the challenge. So thanks, I love having you on this call to help me manage the whole thing. So thank you. I have thought a lot about this theme of self-discipline and how it relates to parenting and how it relates to, raising our be in our homes or for educators in our schools. And for me, it circles back, it harks back to sort of rituals and routines. I think that when we establish rituals and routines, we create opportunities for self-regulation, for sort of the regulation of the mind. And that helps tremendously with children's ability to self-discipline, frankly, for our ability to self-discipline. So that's where I'm at today. And I'm hoping to get lots and lots of questions about this topic, because I think it's one that is essential to parenting. It's essential to educating children. So it looks like we have, oh, there you are.
Here, could we go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, so to develop self-discipline is in some ways to develop your social and emotional being, to understand yourself and to understand the dynamic of the spaces that you are in and the moments and the issues that you face. We talked a bit last week about trauma and how children are processing, in many cases, are processing this experience of being closed out of their schools, being distanced from their friends, their grandparents, their loved ones, and the spaces that they love oftentimes has caused them trauma. And how they address trauma and how we support them through this trauma will make a difference. If we can give them the skills, and part of that is the skills of ritual and routines, and some people may not see that as skills, but I think certainly engaging in that sense are skills. If we can do that, we can help them through this trauma, and we can turn this trauma into a learning experience that will carry them through a healthy life.
And so, what are your hacks? What would you say are your hacks?
Yeah, I've got a list of them. So, I mean, we've talked before, and I will continuously say, listen, look, and take in what is happening around you and between you and your child necessarily as a parent, teachers. Take it in, look and listen. We come to some conclusions about children pretty quickly. And it's not always that we understand what is going on. We think we do. So one of the hacks is look and listen. Look and listen. Collect data. Be in the moment. And leave behind the last moment in some ways. So sometimes we tie one event into another event, and that pushes us to react in ways that maybe are not optimal. because we're carrying sort of the old news, the old baggage. So I say, be in the present moment, look and listen. And once you've looked and listened, you can learn. And through that learning, you can offer tools. You can offer choices. So when a child is facing crisis, when a child is being what you might think is disrespectful or out of character, without self-regulation, maybe it's a tantrum, maybe it's a willful, I will not, I am not going to. What do you gain? What do you get from that? So your first reaction might be anger. Your first reaction might be frustration. But if you can take a breath, look and listen, you can help children to also look and listen and learn. I think you're switching to a different technology. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes. Can you hear me back? Can you hear me okay
yes,
now?
I can hear you now. Yeah.
It's a little better. Okay, perfect. The wonders of technology. Love it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm calling in with the phone, and hopefully that's better audio. What are your advice to parents too? Because it's also leading with example, right? What
Absolutely.
are their tips and tricks that you would recommend on that end?
Well, modeling is absolutely essential. In many cases, the modeling, what you do is almost, I mean, unless you go to extremes, what you do is almost more important than what you say. So modeling is essential. And that modeling is about showing, how you deal with moments that are suboptimal, how you deal with interplay and exchange with others while around your children. So children are watching all the time, and they're taking in data all the time, and that data is informing how they behave. I was thinking this morning about this very topic and realizing that, my grown children in some ways are reflecting me, and they've hopefully picked up, and I know they have, they're wonderful people, so they've picked up some good habits, but they've also picked up a few habits that were my bad habits. And so I thought to myself, well, I can't expect more from them than what I gave them, than what I modeled, right? I can shine a light on it and say, hey, you picked this up from me. It's not my best self. And so maybe you want to rid yourself of it. As an adult, you can make some choices. But I think, circling back, I realized that modeling is key. It really is. So, trying to show them how you navigate when things are out of order, in a sense, how you self-regulate, how you self-discipline, how you rely and jump into rituals and routines at the very moment when you need it the most.
Thank you for that. And what would you say for people who aren't giving it any importance, who aren't actually diving into this self-discipline and into these routines, and they're like, whatever, or they're going into feeding into the media and all that? Like, what's the wake-up call that people really need to hear? Because I think we need to wake up if we haven't yet.
Yeah, we don't have the luxury of kicking back and not doing, because if we're in a very, very critical moment, particularly in raising our children and teaching our children. This is a critical moment. They are relying upon us. Everything that they knew in terms of ritual and routine has changed. And how in the world can they feel anchored? How will they feel anchored if you are not providing that to them to some degree? How can they feel safe? How can they be certain of your love, your care, your reliability? They need to know that you'll always be there. And being there isn't just to physically be there. And being there isn't to overparent. Being there is to be present in the moment. And you can't just kick back and not, because our children will suffer. As I said last week, you know, our children are in a moment where they can either rise and take from this amazing lessons, or they can fall and live in the anxiety and in the trauma and in the fight or flight mode of life. It's our responsibility, because in the end, their good health is our good health. Not just their good health is my good health as a parent or as a teacher or as the leader of a school. Their good health is our good health as a society. They're going to become the adults that we all interplay with, interact with, depend upon. We want to be a healthy group of people, and we cannot put our feet up now. We cannot. There's no time like the present moment, and we have to step up. Must. And if you as a parent are struggling with self-discipline, with self-regulation, with ritual and routines, and you can't get it together, you have to either rely upon your partner, an important person in your family, or to seek help from those who can help, a social worker, a psychologist, someone. And listen, these are hard and trying times. You know, there are days that have been really tough for me. I'll, admit, put it out in the open, like it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's circling back, right? It's getting up in the morning, getting your feet on the ground, getting yourself organized, and digging into that day. And sometimes it's to say, this is not feeling like a good day. This is feeling like an emotional day. This is feeling like a day of frustration. This is, and that vulnerability, that honesty and vulnerability is okay. It's okay to say, and to hand it over to your partner, hand it over to somebody who can help you, even sometimes hand it over to your child. I'm not having the best day today. What can we do together that would help me jump out of this and help us together? Like, what could this look like today? How could we work together? It's okay.
They may have the best ideas that you've never thought of. Thank you. I want to say hi to Richard, who's on our Backend VIP backstage access. And Richard saying, good morning, glad to be back and listening again. And also has a question. Why do you think there is so much resistance from teachers to focus on this topic?
I think that there are a lot of educators that do not think this is a responsibility, that their responsibility is the academic aspect of the child, and that they forget that there's a whole child in front of them, and that the social and emotional learning is essential. I also think that there are individuals, educators who are struggling themselves, who don't have the rituals, the routines, the self-regulation, the self-discipline. They don't have it. And so it's difficult to teach what you don't have. And it's difficult to shine a light on the fact that you don't have it. And so I think, I've heard from so many educators, not my business. That's for parents to do. That's not my, maybe the minister can do that, the priest can do that, or the church can do that, or the grandparents can do that, or, but that's not mine. That's not for me. I think also that, and this is true of educators, this is true of parents. Our ego gets in the way. Our ego gets in the way. So when if I see the child as a reflection of my success and my worth, then I'm not in my best mindset to help that child. Because what I'm doing is I'm looking for affirmation. I'm looking for, the positive strokes. I am within my ego. And so I am within my power. And when you're within your power, you've overpowered someone. Uh-oh.
Sorry, I'm like muting and unmuting in multiple locations. Thank you for bearing with me. This is an adventure. Oh my goodness. So yeah, so it's about taking on the responsibility, and we talked about that last week about as parents, how parents weren't really as involved in the education of their child, and now are really involved to an extent where they may not even want to, but they are, and it'll be hard not to be involved again. And we talked about how it is our responsibility. It is really everybody's responsibility to take on. It reminds me a totally different subject, but can you hear me okay? Because I don't want to be telling a story okay. And it's choppy. In a totally different subject, in the service industry, right? In hospitality and in nice hotels. If you see something on the floor, you pick it up. You pick it up because even though it's not your responsibility, right? I'm not the person who's supposed to clean the floors. I'm not the one who's supposed to make sure this room is clean or tidy. But no, you have a responsibility overall for the hotel to look pristine, to have that kind of energy to it, and look. So we're all responsible. And if we can't do it ourselves, we have to speak up. We have to say, right now, there's something over there. There's a cleanup on aisle 3. You hear that on grocery stores. I know it's a completely different subject, but it made me think of that. It may be easier for people to visualize. It's like, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility for children to have the best education they can. And when I mean education, and have the best future they can, not by sheltering, not by doing everything for them, but understanding that, what is it that builds that great character? What are the soft skills that you talked about a few weeks ago that will build an incredible adult, especially? And one thing that I want to wake people up to, if this is the time, this will break or make it. It's like, you will either go one way or the other way. There's no really middle ground. Will there be a middle ground?
No, there is no middle ground. There is absolutely no middle ground. We must be present, and we must be engaged for ourselves and for our children. I love the analogy of the picking up because it's true. It's the same thing. That idea that you walk through the hotel and you neaten something up. It's not your home. It's not your place, but for some reason you do it, right? And so then why not look at your role with your child in the same way? To sort of help tidy up, help make that child stronger, make that child better. It's, when we're parenting, when we're teaching, it's so easy to bring our lens to every moment and to think that we know and that we are right and that we are the mentor, we are the leader, we are the teacher, for crying out loud, we are the parent. So it's us. We're large and in charge. And it's quite unfortunate to raise children that way, because what you're doing is you're in a sense putting yourself forward like you are the best. You are the to be emulated. You are the keeper of all things. And it's not true. It's just not true. And if we are the keeper of all things, then what will our children get to keep? What will our children get to develop? We can't be the keeper of all things. So I say, my next evolution, as I'm thinking about it, is like, it's not worth a power struggle. It's not worth getting locked in. We talk about the teacher who doesn't want to take on this responsibility. We talk about the parent who doesn't want to take on the responsibility. How many parents say, I'm my child's best friend? And it just frankly makes me crazy, because you can't be their best friend. You can be possibly, you could be one of their best mentors. You can be possibly one of their best role models. But to be their best friend is to infer that you don't have to step up to the plate and mentor or provide role modeling, and that you'll take care of everything. And ultimately, you're still in charge. You're still not giving your children choice. We must give them choice. In order for them to develop all of this, they must have choice, they must have practice, they must succeed, they must fail, they must rise again.
Oh, I can so see like a snippet of what you just said with the why you should not strive to be your child's best friend. Because a lot of times, I mean, I can tell like my mom, I could even see it in my mom, like she struggles in a way because she wants to be my best friend, and she's a very big, you know, she's more of a mentor. She's a parent. She really is. She's always been a parent, and she can't help it. It's kind of in her genes. It's in her way of being. And
Yeah.
I can see myself being that way when I have children too, because I just, you know, you have to, I have a puppy. I don't have children, totally like unrelated, like not the same, but sometimes I have to be a discipline, like say, like, don't do that, or sit, or do this, or do that. And he like looks at me with these like little puppy eyes, and I'm like, oh, I just wish I could let you do anything you want. That's not gonna let me have him, take him to places. I'm not gonna be able to travel as easily or well. So this, it's like in a much smaller scale. I'm very conscious of that. I can feel it. I already can feel it. So I feel
There
like
you are.
some parents. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's
No.
good. I wasn't able to, but now I can.
Oh, goodness. All right, I'll just move into my next question. One of the things I love about Hack Mankind is we not only have parents, but we also have teachers. One of the questions, how do you support your teachers, researchers to tackle this task? How do they know they're doing it well?
Oh, so I think, you know, if we really want to know how we're doing, we look to the children. We look and see how they are doing. In other words, in schools where children are interacting with other children, and particularly in our school where they're interacting with children of all ages, you'll also you'll see what you've taught in their actions, how they interact with a friend, how they interact with another teacher, how they interact with a younger or older student. You'll see in that. And I think that's the best affirmation. But there are times where we come together as a faculty. Well, we come together as a faculty often because we're very interested, as was referred, we call our teachers teacher researchers. We're very interested in the collection of data, and that collection of data is through looking and listening. And bringing it back to the table to say, I looked, I listened, this is what I saw, this is what I heard, this is what I think, but I'm not sure. And so then the dialogue begins with colleagues. Well, I heard that, and I looked and I listened, and from my schema, this is what I heard. So it's different, right? We have different perspectives. So now with those different perspectives, well, what could we do? Is it this or is it that? Is it a little bit of both? Is it something we don't know? And oftentimes the important part is the development of questions that you take back to the child. You know, yesterday when I saw you, you know, arguing over the ball in the playground, and you had a meltdown and you kicked that kid. You know, I thought about it, and I wondered why, because you're not typically like that. That's not what I normally see. So what do you think made you so angry? What can we learn from that? Because we can decide what it is, but we probably won't be right. We probably won't be right, or we won't have the whole story. So it's often to go back to colleagues, you know, even if you can't do that, to journal and see what rises for you, and then take your questions back to the child. And approaching children with questions instead of directives, but approaching children with questions instead of directives is so much more valuable. There's so much more learning in that.
And it doesn't mean that, for example, the kicking the other child because of the ball doesn't mean that there are no consequences. There's consequences can still be there, but approaching it initially the way you mentioned, and then saying, well, you know that the consequences of hitting another child is this. It still means you're still enforcing consequences, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, we should have rules with reason, right? And we should have logical consequences. And provides, again, an anchor for children. So rules with reason and logic with logical consequences. So when I say rules with reason, why do we make a particular rule? Who makes that rule? How are we together invested in that rule? So now we know what the rule is. We've helped to make the rule. We have reason behind the rule. I think it's really essential. I mean, there are some rules that just have to be made. They're flat out. They're about safety. They are required. But there are many, 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 many rules that children encounter that they don't understand. They don't know why. They don't know how it connects. They don't get it. And they also don't get the consequence. So the knee-jerk reaction where, you're now punished and you're going to spend the day in your room, is that appropriate to the moment? Is it appropriate to the action? Does it work for the child, or does it create this angst that breaks down your relationship with that child? So again, rules with reason and logical consequences. There should always be consequences.
And I really think that's so useful what you just mentioned, and Richard on our backhand is also mentioning that, love that, and that the students and children should be on the team to make the rules. So my next question is, even at home, would you say you could have a rule making day where you sit down and brainstorm on reviewing what the rules are and what the consequences are if we break them, so that it gives a little more structure to the children and to the parents? And then if that's not working, then revisit it. What's your advice?
Absolutely. You have to remember that you're a team, whether it's a group of children together with their teachers in a classroom, or it's children at home with their parents and other adults. Teamwork is the way to go. And making these rules together means that we're all more invested. We are more invested in the rules and the reasoning behind the rules. And then we should revisit those rules from time to time, because maybe they stopped working, or maybe another problem emerges, or maybe something that was a big deal is no longer a big deal, but now there's something else. So for instance, at our school, we have a student judiciary committee. And so the children make rules together, and then when the rules are broken, they can request a hearing through the judiciary committee, and one child from each of our classrooms sits on that committee, hears all sides of the story, and tries to come up with a logical, we call it restorative justice. Some people would say consequence. But it's based on an understanding of the perspective from each person.
So, and would you recommend we do that in families? And what are some examples?
Absolutely do that in families. I think we should also have a peace space. So we have from time to time had peace tables. So where children who are bickering with each other can come together, they can ask for another student to mediate and support them, and they can hear each other, and they can work through the differences that they've had and try to come to some degree of peace, some understanding, and ability to respect each other from that understanding. We have had children go home and tell their parents, we need a peace table. And so many parents have put in a peace space, whether it's a table or sitting on the stairs or, wherever they go, but it's a ritual. Here's about ritual, right? We create this ritual. If you request a peace conference, then we go to this space, and in this space, we have a conversation about how we're going to resolve our difference. Oftentimes with young children, we use a red card, a green card. So if you have a red card, you can't speak. You got the green card, you're speaking. And then you exchange cards. And often, if you can have a third person, they help with the mediation of that and the sharing that. And sometimes the mediator will say, okay, so Jessica, I hear you saying, is that right? You might say, yes, that's right. Okay, Karen, Jessica is saying do you understand that? What's your thought about that? So oftentimes the mediator plays an important role in this. It's tough when it's two parents and a child, because one parent has to play a very neutral role. And so that often has to be practiced. But it's a very effective way to have peace in your home.
And we have an amazing hacks. I'm like, I don't have children, but I feel like every time I speak with you, Karen, I'm preparing myself, and I will do so much better after after this. What advice would you give? This is one of the questions we have on our back end. What advice would you give to teachers or parents speaking? So let's say teachers speaking to parents when classroom rules clash with the rules of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say vice versa as well. When the house rules clash with that of the classroom, what do you, at home and classroom, what's your advice on that?
I think it really depends on what we're talking about. So I'll give you, for instance, comes to mind instantly. So let's talk about that playground situation, right? The child who was kicked, might go home and the parent might say, hey, tomorrow when you see that kid, knock him right on his rear end so he never does that to you again. I've heard that, right? And we all know that that is not the culture, at least it's not the culture in our school. So in cases like that, we really have to talk to the parent about this conflict between their philosophy and their rules and our philosophy and our rules. And to say, this is not a negotiable rule. Your child cannot come in and retaliate. Retaliation just fuels more retaliation. And it's a conflict that'll permeate our environment and our culture, and people will become divided and take sides, and it's not good. And I like to often say to a parent, so let me ask you this. So this lesson that you've taught your child, that they should stand up for themselves, they should fight back. Will that be okay when they're 18, when they're 25, when they're 35? Should they always put up their dukes and knock someone out? Because, that's just, I don't think it's the society we're looking for. It's certainly not the rules of our society. It wouldn't be tolerated, and it could create some tremendous problems. Now, I understand that children may feel at some point the need to defend themselves. I certainly don't think that anybody should be brutalized or knocked around, or, it's not what I'm advocating for, but there are better ways. And so often the conversation with the family is, what are those better ways? What would you like to see happen here? That reaches beyond retaliation, and also to some degree reaches into empathy. So why is this happening? Can we be empathetic for a moment? Why is that child kicking? What did the other child do? What is the interchange between the two of them? There's much more information to gather than, hey, I was in the playground, I had a ball and the kid grabbed it from me and I kicked him. Or vice versa, I was kicked. That's one side of the story. I always say there's three sides of the stories. There's yours, there's mine, and there's the one that is like in the middle, the one that probably is the truest. Because maybe somebody on the outside who didn't have any emotional involvement sees the whole thing and can sort it out. That's where that peace conference and mediation also helps. Can't hear you. I think I see that Rich is asking about classroom rules and that are non-negotiable and created without students. The only rule that I would say is a non-negotiable rule is a rule that might be built all around safety. We certainly have a responsibility to keep our students safe, and so a rule about maybe getting too close to an open window, or I don't know. But there are some rules that are essential, and rules that would be understood by the student. So maybe it isn't even that you make it without the student, but you state it with the student and give reason for it, and they will generally accept that rule. So I think that all rules can truly be made with students, but some of those rules have to be presented by the teacher because they are about safety. So, and I think that's true in the home too. There are things that are just non-negotiables, what we sometimes call in school must-dos. So, if you're taking your children out onto the sidewalk, you don't want them running out in traffic. That's an obvious rule. Like, it's our responsibility. But children will understand that. I think that if you create rules that are meaningful together, if you create rules that are meaningful, that are clear, and that are focused, you're doing a good job. I'm not sure, Jessica, if you're still here with me, but I'm going to try and keep going here. I think there's something else there is something else that has come up for me as I thought about speaking today, and it's about differentiation, and particularly around social and emotional learning. So I do believe it's essential for children to experience and have support in developing their social and emotional learning. Oftentimes, we come at it with our own set of eyes. So, for instance, social emotional learning might involve self-care. Like, how do we care for ourselves? How do we start our day? How do we move through our day? How do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with disappointment? How do we deal with frustration? How do we deal with anger? These are all things that children have to come to terms with. I've heard, and particularly in Hack Mankind, a lot of talk about yoga and meditation and exercise and those sorts of self-care approaches. And although I agree that many of those things help, they don't help everyone all the time. They're not for instance, to be perfectly honest with you, I do not enjoy yoga. Doesn't help me. I find it, for whatever reason, I find it frustrating. I can't explain it, just don't enjoy it. If I came into a classroom, or if I woke up in the morning in my home and my parents said to me, we're going to start our day with yoga, I would be disappointed. I would be frustrated. I probably would be annoyed because yoga doesn't work for me. It's possible that meditation doesn't work. So I've heard of schools who have meditation moments. Everybody stops in the whole school and we all meditate. Well, for some kids, that's not their way of self-regulating. That's not their way of taking care. They may be more kinesthetic. They may need to run around the schoolyard. That might work better for them. I think it's important to differentiate self-care techniques. And in order to do that, we have to ask children. We have to watch children. We have to give them a great deal of exposure. So I'm not saying don't expose them. Expose them to meditation, expose them to exercise, expose them to yoga, expose them to all sorts of possibilities. A cup of tea, a warm glass of milk. There's a million different ways to care for oneself, but understand that ultimately they need to find what works for them. So you may, as a parent, enjoy meditation. Your children may not. That could be very sad for you, but they may not. You may enjoy yoga. They may not. You may need to run around the yard. They may not. It's very important to allow for choice and to shine a light on what seems to be working and ask questions about why that might be working. Ask if there's another approach, if there's another idea. I think Jessica's trying to come on. How are we doing, Jessica? You here? Trying.
we're sitting, so if you'd like to wrap up with us.
You're breaking up, so I'm not sure what you're saying, but I think I'm going to try and wrap this up if that's okay with you. And certainly please jump in if you can.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to wrap it up by saying that, parenting, teaching, being with children, and providing mentorship, guidance, support, and love is probably the greatest challenge and reaps the greatest reward. I would say to be patient, to model good self-care and self-regulation skills, to create routines and rituals. And they can be new. Certainly, we've created some new rituals and routines. To look and listen and gather data from your children. And from yourself, be able to be self-reflective and look at how you're doing, and just be meaningful, clear, and focused, even as you develop your rules, your rituals, your logical consequences, and certainly be willing to take consequences if, in fact, you have aligned yourself in a way that you need a timeout. So I often say to parents, sometimes you have to give yourself a timeout, be willing to take that timeout. And the same with teachers or anybody working with children, be willing to take a timeout, be willing to say, I need a break. I'm going to go sit for mommy's getting a timeout. And children will understand that. And then I think just children need to know you'll always be there to hold them up, to hug them, to care for them, but you will not do everything for them. That you're going to teach them how to do it for themselves, because ultimately you're going to hand, in a sense, power to them. You're going to hand choice to them. And that's the best kind of love that you can give them.